The fall of the Western Roman Empire marked a watershed moment in European history, ushering in a period of uncertainties, transformations, and reconfigurations that would shape the continent's future. But what really happened after this monumental collapse? How did the political, social, and cultural structures that once upheld Roman civilization disintegrate and transform into a new world? In this video, we will explore the consequences of this disintegration, from the rise of feudalism to the lasting influence of Christianity and the Byzantine Empire. We will analyze how invasions and migrations shaped the emerging states of Europe and how classical knowledge was preserved and later reintroduced, fueling the Renaissance. To give you an idea of how influential and important the Roman Empire was at the time, in the 2nd century AD, the population of the city of Rome varied between 800,000 and 1 million inhabitants, while the entire Roman Empire had about 50 to 60 million residents. According to a 2015 UN report, the total world population at that time was about 200 million people, so we can say that the Roman Empire housed about 1/4 of the entire world population of that era. During this period, the empire reached the peak of its territorial expansion, covering an area of approximately 4 million square kilometers, which would correspond today to more than 40 countries in Europe, Asia, and North Africa. With the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD, after the deposition of the last emperor, Romulus Augustulus, Europe entered a period of great political disintegration. The vast empire that had united various regions under centralized administration for centuries began to fragment into multiple independent kingdoms, creating a chaotic landscape of instability. The division of the empire had already been formalized in 395 AD when it was split into two parts: the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire, the latter later known as the Byzantine Empire, which survived for another 1,000 years. However, in the West, the collapse of Roman institutions opened the door for peoples considered barbarians, such as the Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Franks, Vandals, and Anglo-Saxons, to take control of regions once belonging to Rome. These barbarian peoples established their own kingdoms in the former Roman territories. But the transition was marked by a lack of continuity in governance. Roman culture, infrastructure, and laws, which had maintained some cohesion among the regions, began to dissolve as these new kingdoms formed. Each of these kingdoms, such as the Franks in Gaul and the Visigoths in Hispania, adopted their own power systems, often blending Roman traditions with their tribal cultures. This led to a profound political fragmentation, in which the unity that the Roman Empire had imposed was replaced by a series of microstates and territories controlled by tribal chiefs or barbarian kings. Besides the disintegration of central authority, the instability that followed the fall of the Western Roman Empire also resulted in frequent conflicts among these kingdoms, each seeking to consolidate power and expand their borders at the expense of their neighbors. During this period, the long era that Renaissance historians called the Dark Ages began, part of the Middle Ages, which lasted from 476 AD until 1453 AD. This name arose due to the perception that the era following the Roman collapse was marked by a sharp decline in classical knowledge, learning, and cultural production that had flourished during the empire. With the end of the centralized and sophisticated structure that Rome had established, many of the ancient intellectual and administrative practices were lost or severely weakened. Roman schools, libraries, and study centers, responsible for preserving and transmitting classical knowledge, were largely destroyed or abandoned, leading to a significant reduction in literacy and education. Roman infrastructure, such as its roads, aqueducts, and urban complexes, was left in ruins. With the lack of maintenance and the absence of a central authority to coordinate the preservation and repair of these constructions, many of these works deteriorated rapidly. Aqueducts, which carried fresh water to cities, ceased to function, exacerbating the decline of urban areas, while the roads that had facilitated the movement of armies and merchants became impassable. The physical legacy of Rome began to gradually disappear, reflecting the end of an era in which power, commerce, and culture had been centralized. Furthermore, the urban institutions that sustained the Roman way of life also suffered a collapse. The cities, which had been the heart of the political, economic, and cultural life of the empire, saw their populations drastically decline. Trade, which once interconnected the entire Mediterranean and adjacent regions, suffered a severe blow with the fall of trade routes and the increasing insecurity on the roads. The fall of the Western Roman Empire brought about a profound transformation in the social and economic structure of Europe, culminating in the rise of feudalism. Europe, which had previously benefited from the network of Roman roads and the constant flow of goods, entered an era of predominantly rural economy. Urbanization gave way to life in villages, and the model of self-sufficiency, where local communities produced almost everything they consumed, became the norm. This further reinforced the isolation of regions and political fragmentation. This socio-economic system was deeply rooted in agriculture and the relationships of dependency among different layers of society, especially between lords and their vassals. The absence of an effective central authority and widespread insecurity made feudalism a pragmatic response to the need for protection and subsistence in a fragmented and violent world. Small territories, often centered around castles or fortifications, became the new units of power. In these territories, feudal lords controlled the land and exercised authority over the peasants who worked it. The peasants, mostly serfs, were not slaves, but they also did not have full freedom. They cultivated the land and, in return, received protection from the lords, who held local military power. This relationship of vassalage, based on the exchange of loyalty and military service for land and protection, was at the core of feudalism. The feudal lords, in turn, were vassals of more powerful nobles or even kings, who theoretically held supreme control, although in practice they often struggled to exercise such authority. The decentralization of power was one of the main characteristics of this new social organization. The control of vast regions was no longer feasible, and instead, authority fragmented into hundreds of small domains. Kings, although formally sovereign, frequently had their authority challenged or ignored by powerful feudal lords who commanded private armies and governed their territories as small monarchs. This decentralization of power led to constant disputes and wars among various feudal leaders, who fought for territory, wealth, and influence. At the same time, feudalism created a rigid hierarchy in which land was the primary source of wealth and social status depended directly on the possession or control of land, thus perpetuating an agrarian and militarized society for centuries. Moreover, in the following centuries after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Western Europe continued to be shaken by new waves of invasions and migrations that profoundly shaped the continent. Among these invasions, the Vikings, Magyars, and Muslims played key roles, intensifying the already present instability and contributing to the formation of future European nations and their borders. The Vikings, originating from Scandinavia, began their incursions into Europe from the late 8th century. Known for their naval skills, the Vikings attacked and plundered coastal and river communities, quickly advancing inland due to their ability to navigate rivers and seas. Their invasions not only devastated regions of England, France, and other parts of Europe, but also resulted in permanent settlements, such as the establishment of the Duchy of Normandy, which would later play a crucial role in European history. The Viking incursions forced many kingdoms and feudal lords to develop more sophisticated defense systems, reinforcing castles and forming alliances for protection. Meanwhile, from the east, the Magyars, a people from the Eurasian steppe, also ravaged Europe during the 9th and 10th centuries, conducting rapid incursions into territories that today comprise Germany, Italy, and even France. The Magyars spread terror among the European populations. However, after being defeated in decisive battles, such as the Battle of Lechfeld in 955, the Magyars settled in the Carpathian Basin, where they eventually founded the Kingdom of Hungary, shaping the borders of Central Europe and becoming a regional power. From the south, Muslim incursions, especially by the Saracens, brought new threats to the European Mediterranean. Following the Islamic expansion, which had conquered much of North Africa and the Iberian Peninsula, Muslims launched attacks against southern Italy, Sicily, and the Mediterranean islands. These invasions contributed to the isolation of Western Europe and stimulated the formation of alliances among Christian kingdoms, which would later culminate in the Crusades in an attempt to contain the Muslim advance. These invasions, coming from different directions, not only created an environment of constant insecurity, but also played a crucial role in the consolidation of new states and political identities. The European kingdoms, forced to reorganize and defend themselves, strengthened their political and military structures, initiating processes of centralization that would later result in the formation of the European nations we recognize today. During this period, the Christian Church emerged as one of the few unifying forces in Western Europe. Already well established before the fall of the empire, the Church consolidated as the main structure of spiritual power and, in many cases, political power. Without the presence of an effective central government, bishops, archbishops, and the Pope himself began to assume responsibilities that had previously belonged to the Roman state apparatus, providing a form of cohesion amid the chaos. The Church offered not only a sense of order and continuity, but also spiritual comfort to a disenfranchised population navigating the ruins of the empire. Bishops, often the most influential figures in many cities and regions, became political authorities and community leaders. In times of uncertainty, it was common for bishops to intervene to mediate conflicts, protect populations, and, in some cases, organize defense against invaders. The Pope, in turn, became recognized as a figure of great importance, especially in the West, where his influence grew significantly. The centralization of papal power in Rome and the adoption of a solid ecclesiastical hierarchy helped establish an organizational structure that overlapped with the vacuum left by imperial administration. The rise of Christianity was also facilitated by the fact that many of the barbarian kingdoms that emerged in the Roman territories embraced the Christian faith. The conversion of these kings and their peoples to Christianity, often under the influence of the clergy, helped consolidate the power of the Church. Kingdoms like that of the Franks, led by Clovis, who converted to Christianity, obtained the Church's support to legitimize their rule, creating a symbiotic relationship between the rulers and the ecclesiastical hierarchy. This mutual support between the barbarian kings and the Church not only ensured the internal stability of these kingdoms, but also helped spread Christianity in regions that had previously had little or no Christian influence, profoundly shaping the future religious and political landscape of medieval Europe. As the Western Roman Empire fragmented, the Eastern Roman Empire, with its capital in Constantinople, continued to thrive for nearly 1,000 years, becoming known as the Byzantine Empire. Unlike the West, which was swept by barbarian invasions and internal collapses, Byzantium maintained much of the Roman traditions, institutions, and culture, thus preserving Rome's heritage in a different form. Under the leadership of skilled emperors and supported by a more robust, centralized administration, the empire survived as a military, economic, and cultural power in the Eastern Mediterranean, exerting significant influence over Eastern Europe and the Middle East. The city of Constantinople, located at a strategic position between Europe and Asia, was fundamental to the longevity of the Byzantine Empire. Protected by formidable walls and a disciplined army, the city became a center of trade, culture, and religion, rivaling any other European capital of the time. Byzantium also stood out as an important bastion of Orthodox Christianity, distinguishing itself from Western Christianity under the leadership of the Pope. The Eastern Orthodox Church, with the Patriarch of Constantinople as one of its key figures, played a central role in Byzantine life, influencing the kingdoms of Eastern Europe, particularly Russia, and establishing deep religious and cultural connections with the Slavic world. Although the West experienced a significant decline in the study of classical sciences and literature after the fall of the Roman Empire, this knowledge did not disappear completely. In the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic world, many of the intellectual traditions of antiquity were preserved, studied, and expanded. Byzantium, a direct heir to Greco-Roman culture, maintained libraries and centers of learning where works by ancient philosophers, mathematicians, and scientists such as Aristotle, Euclid, and Galen continued to be read and copied. Moreover, Byzantine scholars commented on these works, preserving and transmitting classical thought. Constantinople was a repository of ancient knowledge, and its artistic production, particularly the magnificent mosaics and architecture, spread throughout the region, influencing both the East and the West. Even in the face of numerous challenges over the centuries, including wars with Persians, Arabs, and Turks, Byzantium remained a resilient power. Its definitive fall in 1453, when Constantinople was taken by the Ottomans, marked the end of an era, but the Byzantine cultural and religious legacy left enduring marks on European and world history. In the Islamic world, following the expansion of the caliphates, there was an unprecedented cultural and scientific flourishing. In cities like Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba, centers of learning emerged where Muslim, Jewish, and Christian scholars translated classical texts from Greek and Latin into Arabic, preserving and developing the knowledge inherited from Rome and Greece. Islamic philosophers such as Avicenna and Averroes not only preserved these texts but also commented on them and expanded their ideas, contributing to advances in science, medicine, and philosophy. Over the centuries, the intellectual output of the Islamic world became a bridge between the classical past and the Renaissance future. This vast repository of knowledge began to return to Western Europe through contacts with the East. During the Crusades and through trade with the Eastern Mediterranean, Europeans encountered classical texts and their Arabic translations. Schools and universities, like that of Toledo in Spain, became central translation points where Western scholars, often in collaboration with Muslims and Jews, began translating ancient works from Arabic and Greek into Latin. This process of rediscovery reached its peak during the Renaissance when the West, enriched by this knowledge, experienced an intellectual, artistic, and scientific explosion that would redefine the course of European history. The legacy of antiquity, preserved by Byzantium and the Islamic world, was thus reintroduced and incorporated into Western culture, fueling the cultural and scientific renaissance of Europe. As we delve into the history of post-Roman Europe, it becomes clear that the period following the fall of the Roman Empire was not merely a chapter of decline and darkness, but an era of profound transformation and reconfiguration. The rise of feudalism, the ascendance of Christianity, and the enduring influences of the Byzantine Empire, along with invasions and the preservation of classical knowledge, shaped the landscape that eventually gave rise to the Renaissance and the modern world we know today. But history does not end here. It continues to influence and inspire us. How do you see the impact of these changes on contemporary Europe? Do you believe that the lessons learned during this period are still relevant to us today? Share your thoughts in the comments below, as we would love to hear your perspective. And don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating content about Roman history. In the video on the screen, I will show you everything about how Rome invaded and conquered ancient Greece. Click on it and check it out.